Hey y'all, Bryce here with BMS Outdoors. Today we're going to be going over some ice fishing tips, and this will be the walleye edition. So, as many of you know and are ready for, we got first ice approaching pretty quickly here. Central Wisconsin, at least, I had an inch of ice in a couple of my very small ponds and backwaters. So it's definitely exciting. Hopefully this weekend might have a chance to get out, go for some panfish. But this video is kind of geared towards, people who are newer into ice fishing, or you've only been fishing certain lakes your whole life, so spots are, like hand-me-down spots, and you want to go learn some new water. Just a very broad overview of what I suggest you do. A little background on me is I have just finished up my degree. I've been trying to do videos, but it was a lot to do in school. But majored in fisheries and hydrology, so I have a pretty good background on anything freshwater in the Midwest. I hope I can use what I've learned to help some of y'all out. So the first thing we're going to do is look at where you should be looking when you want to find walleyes, and we can look at their preferred habitats from various studies. And what we've learned is large lakes that are shallow and have very turbid water, so dirty water, are generally better for walleyes than deep clear lakes. And this just goes off of how they spawn. So they just spawn better when they have shallow lakes where they can get right up on shore onto like cobblestone substrates. Their eggs just hold better, and their populations seem to do better. And dirty water also makes sense because from an evolutionary standpoint, their eyes, if you've caught a walleye before, you know the eyes, it looks like a cat's eye. That's very specialized, so they can see incredibly well at night. But the second thing we're going to look for, once you've determined you got a lake, there's walleye in it, you want to be looking for structure. And a good thing to do during first ice is if you were fishing during the fall from your boat and can get there during first ice, you want to go there because those fish are still going to be there. There's some kind of bait fish and there's something keeping them there. But if you're out there later ice, those fish move around, and they move around a lot more than other fish do during the winters especially. So you're gonna have to be moving around, popping a bunch of holes, and just going until you find some fish, and then you can hammer an area, and then you got to move with them again. This is going to be especially true on heavily pressured lakes where there's a lot of people moving those fish. An example of this would be if you're ice fishing in Wisconsin, think of Winnebago, big line of people. And generally what I would like to do is always stay on one of the ends of the herd. You want to be beating them to where like they're pushing all the fish to you, and you want to be outside of them. Another thing here is looking at transitions, and you're going to have to learn how to read contour maps to find these. Some great resources for this would be the DNR website or Navionics, or if you have like a Lake Master chip in a boat unit that you take off and use for ice fishing, you got to learn how to read the changes in contour, because something pretty small can actually be the difference between fish and no fish. And you're going to be looking for just changes. So like where sand becomes gravel, where small rock changes to bigger rocks or boulders, where weeds start, or knowing where pockets of weeds are, drop-offs, and then points. These are all going to be important transition spots to look for walleyes here. And you're just going to have to hammer the area and figure out where they are. Come to the lake with an idea, especially if you're fishing a lake for the first time. Like you got to use, I caught fish on this lake this way. This lake's pretty similar. I'm going to try doing this. And if it works, that's awesome. And if it doesn't, you just got to try something else. Or ideally, you know somebody that's fished that lake and they kind of know what they're doing, so you can piggyback off them. But if you have no previous information, you're just going to have to go out there and try it yourself. And keep a log is something I could suggest. I just use the notes app on my phone, and every time I catch a sizable walleye, I'll just put a little note, 12 foot of water, fishing gravel, and then carry on what I was using to. Next, we're going to be talking about when to fish, and this is going to be very dependent on the lake. So, like I was saying earlier, from a biological standpoint, walleye are excellent nighttime predators, but it doesn't mean they only feed at night. And this is where walleye preferring high turbidity lakes or murky lakes is important. So when that water's dirty and there's a lot of snow on top of the ice, it's like nighttime all the time to these fish. So they'll be eating during the day, dawn, dusk, night, doesn't really matter. You're just gonna have to go out there and try a couple different times. I fall into thinking I gotta be out all night to catch walleye sometimes, so I'll get there 3 fish through the night into the morning. And that's not always the case. Some lakes just shut off at night. An example would be like Petenwell flowage, not as good at night. And then Lake Dubay, everything just shuts off at night, like very few walleyes after dusk. So you just have to go out there and try it a couple times. They might just hammer it middle of the day, or it might be a nighttime bite. You never know. Just have to go out there and try. Generally, I've found that dawn and dusk are pretty much the best times to fish. That's for a lot of species. It's just, it's just a pretty noticeable change and it just gets everything moving. And it's a really special time to fish. And then a lot more lakes do seem to do better at night and then the daytime. But like I said, you just have to learn this for your specific lake. What to use. So there are predatory fish, and their key forage species are going to be young of the year bluegills, young of the year perch, shad, various minnows, crawfish, etc. Um, there's a lot of studies that we went over that relate to yellow perch and walleye for growth and their population numbers. So if you have a lake that's pretty heavy in perch, you should have a good chance of finding some good sized walleyes in that lake. Uh, Obviously, not a lot of perch, not a lot of bluegills. Probably not going to be a very good walleye lake. And then some of the tactics you can employ would be like easiest low effort option. So say you're fishing with young kids or you have a lot of people, it's really freaking cold and you don't want to move around. You're going to want to use live bait, throw out some tip ups, set up a shack, just hang out, maybe 2 flags outside depending on your state. And then just be in your shack relatively close to your flags, jigging some kind of aggressive bait. Maybe you can try drawing them in. They don't want to hit the aggressive option, but they have 2 easy to eat, suckers, minnows right outside. Um, and then the other option would be like a more effort. This would be larger search baits, something loud, something bright, something that gets attention. And this would be like a spoon, a rip and wrap, blade baits, something that gets their attention. And you can always mix these two too. Like you could have a dead stick right next to you while you're working an aggressive bait. Um, Fish comes in to look at the aggressive bait, doesn't want it, sees the minnow, smokes the minnow, happy days. It's just, you just got to try stuff until something works and then make a note of it when it works. Also, having access to some kind of a fish finder, whether it be like a Vexler flasher, Markham, Panoptics, if you're lucky enough, makes this process awesome because you can see the fish like what they're interested in, what they're not. If you're getting hits, if they're coming in looking at it and then being like, nah. It's highly recommend. Usually you can find, like if you're just getting into the sport, you can find something cheap, $100, $140 on Facebook Marketplace for one of the older Vexlers. It's definitely worth it. Never gonna fish without one again. Okay. And there's some useful info. You can find free contour maps for almost every lake through your DNR's website, and these are pretty awesome. Usually they have the bottoms charted too, so it tells you there'll be a little legend on the side. It'll be like muck, sand, sparse vegetation, rocks, boulder, gravel, all that stuff. And you can, print screen or snip tool it out, take it into paint, circle some areas, figure out where you want to go. I highly recommend that. Also on the DNR websites, you can find stocking reports and lake survey data for a lot of lakes. So DNRs are always out gathering data, and they post all of it in public areas, which is really nice. So you can go see if they were doing an electrofishing survey. You can go see what they caught, what year it was, and sometimes they even have papers. They've used that data to make papers and or do some kind of research, and you can read that. Just go down to the results or the discussion section, and they'll sometimes just say like, oh yeah, we got an above average year class of walleyes coming through, and you can use that to your advantage. Trial and error does lead to learning, so you might get skunked. It happens to all of us. Something's just that they're not eating that day. Just try to learn every time you go out there. It'd be a big thing. And then these next two are really important. So I mentioned we are coming up to first ice. Some of my spots have 3/4 of an inch of ice, and we're gonna try and get out there early because it's what you do when you're young or old. I don't know. You try to get on. You want to be the first person on the ice, and it's not always the smartest thing to do, but you send it. So always take somebody with you, or some ice picks, or make sure you have a suit that floats, or a rope, or you need a spud bar. You got to take as many steps as you can to make sure if you go through, you can get out. We don't want anyone dying for fish. That's never worth it. But it's super important. It happens every year, and you just don't want to be the next one. So make sure at the bare minimum, have ice picks. Make sure you're strong enough to claw your way out if you go through, or you're fishing somewhere shallow, something like that. And like I said, if you're new to ice fishing, Uncut Angling on YouTube has an amazing video from about 3 years ago on ice safety. Throws himself into the water like 5 different scenarios and shows you how to get out and what to do. Highly recommend that resource. If anybody has any questions on walleyes or would like to recommend what fish I should go over next, put that down in the comments. I like to hear, your guys' responses. Like I said, I'm a fisheries biologist, so I've been fishing my whole life. I've got a pretty good technical understanding of how fish in the Midwest work, and I've got a lot of life experiences on what I've done and what has worked. We fish for just about everything up here, so I'd like to hear your guys' comments, and stay tuned. I will have some on the ice videos coming as soon as we have ice. All right, y'all, later.